Hello and welcome to The Key, the podcast for field teams and the people who lead them. I'm Torben, and I'm a vehicle reimbursement expert here at Cardata. Today, I'm joined by Jennifer McClure, a keynote speaker, the CEO of Unbridled Talent, and the Chief Excitement Officer of DisruptHR. Jennifer has had a long and successful career in human resources, and we're really lucky to get to speak with her today about how you can be a change leader in your workplace. The workplace is evolving and changing faster than ever, and so embracing change is necessary, but it can also be scary. Today, we'll get into how you can overcome your fears of change and even become the champion for the positive changes your organization needs to embrace in order to keep up with the accelerating marketplace. So, Jennifer, welcome to The Key. How are you this morning?
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting with you about this topic.
We are very excited to get to talk to somebody like yourself. Do you mind just taking a moment and introducing yourself to our audience and talking about anything that's kind of interesting to you in terms of your experience with change and change leadership?
Sure. Well, I started my career as an HR practitioner, did everything from a department of one to working in a Fortune 100 organization. Then after I worked in a business turnaround situation and was kind of tired and wanted to try something new, I went into executive search for a little while, helping organizations connect with the leaders that are the best fit for their culture. And then in 2010, started my own business called Unbridled Talent, where I am a professional speaker. I do speaking and training where I talk about talent strategies, high impact leadership, and the importance of personal branding. So that's what I've been doing for the last 14 years now, I guess. And in 2013, we started DisruptHR here in Cincinnati, which is an organization with local organizers hold events around the world. We currently have 156 licensed cities in 34 countries, I believe, where events are being held. There are over 7,000 of the 5-minute DisruptHR talks out there online with people talking about anything and everything related to the workplace and the future of work. And we want to hear from voices. And that's been the beauty of HR, is that we are able to hear from people who have ideas that aren't typically being shared on conference stages, et cetera. So I'm always excited to hear from those people what's going on in the world, not just in the US or North America, but around the world. And it helps me to kind of stay abreast of what's changing in the world of work.
Yeah. And, on that note, how is the workplace evolving and changing these days? Is it an exciting time? Are we at a plateau, or what's going on?
Well, I think excitement can be both positive and negative, right? I think a lot of people would like for the ride to slow down and get off. But the reality is, I think the pace of change is only going to continue. A lot of that's due to technology and the technology changes that have occurred over the last many years, but particularly since the pandemic, and that are on the forefront with AI and what that will bring to the workplace and to us as humans, and how we, if we think back to, many of you may be too young to really remember when the iPhone kind of came and changed the world. I think when you think about products that really changed the world, that ability to hold a computer in your hand and to instant answer, anything you needed to know, and to navigate and to buy things, and all that brought, and the change that brought, and how that impacted even the workplace. I think AI is that probably on steroids. We're tiptoeing into it in a way, in the sense that a lot of people don't really know how to use it, or they may be worried about it, but it's here and it's happening, and it's going to do a lot of good things for the workplace. I think with anything, there will probably be some negative impacts as well. But our job as leaders is to figure out how to embrace the change that is already happening. And in many cases, to be anticipating what the future changes are. So there's changes with technology, there's changes with how people view the workplace and work, and how it fits into their life and employee experience, and what they want at work and what they don't want at work, and what they'll accept and what they don't. So we often focus on the technology piece of it, but the human side has really changed dramatically over the last few years as well. And that has impacted how we're able to get work done too.
Yeah, there's so much interesting going on there. I just wanted to kind of, look back over the last couple of years. You mentioned the pandemic. It seems like because of the AI revolution, or so-called, we've almost forgotten about what a watershed moment that was in the kinds of work that we started doing. as you correctly identified, I'm too young to remember a lot of things. So, but I do remember because I was beginning my career during the pandemic, in the early stages of the pandemic, and it was my current career. I had some jobs before that, and it was very interesting to note the shifts, those technological shifts. What do have we forgotten about those shifts though? Like, are we still cognizant of those massive changes that occurred during the pandemic? Are we so past that now and just onto AI? What do you think about that stuff?
I think yes and no. I mean, I know I like to remind leaders a lot of times to pause and think about what they did accomplish in the, both immediately following the announcement of a global pandemic and how we navigated that, what you were able to do. The thought being that if your boss had come into your office on Friday, March the 13th, or was it a pandemic going on, and had said to you, by Monday, I want you to figure out how to send everybody home to still be able to do their work. And for the people that have to come into work, you have to have them 6 feet apart and keep them safe, and they can't breathe on each other. You would have said that can't be done. And that's never going to be able to be done. Not I need some time, if they, told you that it had to happen. But the fact that it did happen and we had to make that shift overnight, was it perfect? And did people do it, were we able to have everybody up and running right away? No, but I think the speed at which we were able to continue work and how teams came together and how leaders were able to kind of navigate that and set a vision for the future and what we need to do different, or if they did have to downsize or let people go, that many of them did that with care and maybe that they would not have done before. So in some sense, even myself, when I think back, my Facebook, will show you memories, and it'll show me things from 2020 about, what I was doing during the pandemic. And I'm like, was that really just 4 years ago? Because it seems like in some ways a long time in the past, but in some ways it also seems like yesterday. But I think the shifts and what it created in the workplace, again, think about from a human resources perspective. My son, like you, started his first real job. He'd gotten his job offer in December 2019, relocated, went and chose, a house and everything to relocate in March, right before things got really bad, chose a house that was near the office, was looking forward to the commute and working in this big office. And he had everything shipped to his home. All of his onboarding was done when he started in July. Everything was done remotely. He never met his boss in person those first few months. He wasn't able to connect with other people who started at the same time, who were doing the same job, to ask them questions about what they were learning. So from a human resources perspective, that company had to think about, okay, we have new hires coming on. How do we onboard them remotely? How do we train them remotely? How do we get them the equipment that they need? All of that stuff is a huge accomplishment. And I think in the reality, that kind of change impacted the workplace more than we take time to really pause and think about. Now the conversation is about work from home or work in the office, and it's really a conversation that should be about flexibility. People have realized they want flexibility, even if they're a frontline worker at the counter at McDonald's. They want to be able to take their kid to the doctor or, to have some personal time off. So I think that has raised what maybe was underneath the surface for a lot of employees for a long time, that, we want to be treated like humans. We want to live a life outside of work. There have been shifts. My parents, you went to work, you didn't necessarily have to enjoy it. It was just a fact of life. You probably stayed at the same company for 25, 30 years. And there were things like retirement plans and golden handcuffs and all the reasons to do that. But in my lifetime, that changed. They got rid of mostly retirement plans and things like that kept a lot of people at work. And I think the Great Recession of the late 90s caused a lot of people to question their loyalty to a certain place. But then you come along to the pandemic, and it's really just like, I want to live my life. I want to have either more time to myself, or I want to start my own business, or I want to work a side hustle, So there have been shifts throughout our lifetimes. But yeah, there was a huge shift with the pandemic. And to answer your original question, I think it's still impacting the workplace because we now communicate in a different way. We collaborate in a different way. We understand that people want different things than, they aren't necessarily just grateful to come and work for us because we offer them a job. We need to have kind of a mutual partnership in the relationship. But yet a lot of leaders maybe who started their work years ago are still struggling with some of that, because it wasn't like that when I started, so we still have a lot of work to do, I think, to all come on the same page.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it really speaks to the adaptability and resilience of both staff and leaders, to have actually more or less successfully implemented the changes that were necessary during that period of time. And I mean, it sort of seems like it was in some ways, not that there's ever a right time for a pandemic, but we are a little bit technologically ready for it. We had the iPhone, for example. We had computers and nascent sort of virtual networking technologies that allowed us to adapt to the extenuating circumstances that we were confronted with. I think that you might agree that the pandemic and our reactions to it were kind of a catalyst for accelerating technological change. And I heard you say in one of your podcasts that technological change has always been the case. It's never not been the case that technology is changing. And I'm wondering if we have the false idea or the true idea that technology actually is changing faster than ever and things are kind of accelerating. Is that true, or are we kind of fooling ourselves and it's always been this way?
That's a good question. I think, from my perspective, it seems like it's changing faster than ever. There's a new way to do something out there almost every day, a new thing to try, a new platform to look into, new technology in the work tech space, in particular, with ways that, work can be made easier or in some cases more complex. And, if you go to, I just attended the SHRM annual conference in Chicago, and their expo hall had, I don't know, maybe 1,000 vendors in there, and everybody promising that they're the newest and latest and greatest. And I think if you're a people leader or any kind of leader, if you go to your, trade association's conference, the technology that you can find that you aren't even aware of, that can solve problems that you weren't thinking about a technology solution for. In many cases, it's out there, and it's just an awareness of, how can we use this? What should we be searching for? If we have a challenge or a problem, should we be searching for a technology solution first, or should we be navigating how we want to go through this first? So I think it's probably changing. You could Google that phrase, and I'm sure we get lots of positive reinforcement that it's changing faster than ever before, but changing in the sense that the availability of it, the wide array of options. And so the decisions need to be made on what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish, and what is the best way to approach this, and is there a technology solution that can do that? That takes up a lot of brain space, I think, in leaders today. Rather than just thinking, okay, let's assemble a team and everybody figure out how we're going to do this, there may actually be something that can help us do this so our team can focus on other things.
Yeah, so the rate of change is in fact changing, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yes, that is a good quote. That's the title of the podcast.
Sure. Maybe we'll come up with a better quote in the next 45 minutes or something. We'll see. So, okay, things are changing. That's the case. We've established that. So it becomes not about resisting change, but about adapting to change and accepting change and all these sorts of things. But that might, I think you've mentioned, your peers, leaders who have been at work for a while, decades in some cases, might have, adverse reactions to change. So I'm wondering, why are people afraid of change? What makes it scary, and why are they resistant to it?
Oh, there's probably... we could talk all day about that, I'm sure. The human condition. Why are we afraid of change? Some of it's protectionism. We want to protect what, we feel like we have earned. So change can put us at risk, that either someone may do it better, different, or maybe our comfort. You see this a lot with people of privilege. Our comfortable life may change if we allow changes to accept everybody and bring everybody in. So, that is, I think, probably part of the human condition, that we want to protect what we think we've earned or what we've worked for that maybe we don't feel someone else has. And, I think some of that is natural, and some of it is we need to evolve and realize that we'll all be better off if we're working together. And many people do. I think the majority of people do. Other reasons are change is hard. Doing something different, often things break in the process. And so that can be, potentially disastrous if we have something that doesn't work the way we expected, or we can't figure out something while we're making a change, or people resist it and it goes the wrong direction. There's a lot of reasons to prepare for, I have a friend who talks a lot about doing pre-mortems, thinking about what could go wrong before you even start, and planning for those scenarios in advance, so that they don't happen, and spending time on the forefront to really think about what could happen and what could go wrong. And, where I think I'm wired to, let's think about how this is going to go right. But it is, I think, wise to think about what could go wrong, because with any change, usually something does not go as planned. So we need to prepare for that. So, change is painful, change is hard. It's also really important. Change impacts more than just the people that, maybe are involved in creating the change. It impacts our customers. It impacts the broader employee group. It impacts society, depending on that. So often we don't think through the full ramifications of the changes. And then when it does, maybe it goes successfully in terms of what we wanted to accomplish, but it then begins to impact people further down the food chain in a negative way, or in a way that they perceive as negative. And again, we may not have planned for that. So I think there's a lot of good reasons for us to resist change. We like to make our lives easy. We're wired to try to take the easiest path, I think. We don't necessarily want to embark into the unknown in a lot of cases. And you can do pre-mortems and you can prepare, but there are still going to be things that come up that are unknown. And people are resistant to change because, again, they're protecting maybe what they think they have, and what they might perceive is going in a different direction for them.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, we're kind of wired to take the easier path, but it seems like, because of the accelerating technological changes in the marketplace, like the easiest path doesn't necessarily lead somewhere that we'd actually like to go. Like it's incumbent on us to embrace changes, and even though they're a little bit thorny and there's some problems, like it's going to be better that we do it now in a year's time or in 5 years' time, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you look at AI, I always like to say, I had a friend early on in the social media days that, when there was a new platform popping up every so often and everybody's creating a profile and whatever, and it was very exhausting. And he tweeted one day, I consider myself a late early adopter. I like to let a few people go first, see if it works, and then I'll get on board. And I'm like, that's my stance. I like to be a late early adopter. Even when I was in human resources, I remember, my benefits broker came to me and he's like, I forget what it was. It was like PPOs or HMA or whatever. Some acronym was the new way to go. And I'm in Cincinnati, and I'm like, after Procter and Gamble does it, tell me how it worked and then come back. I don't want to be first, so I think, that is similar with AI. There are people that were out there trying things, breaking things, finding out what worked, what didn't work. And in some ways, I'm happy to let them go first. But I think we do need to be curious, to say, I'm just going to ignore AI. It's not going to impact me, or I don't want to do it. That's the wrong approach. But to be curious, to read what's happening out there, what's working, what's not working, what are some possible use cases, to try things, go on, you don't have to buy the corporate Chat GPT, go on and try something, on your home computer at home, see what it might be able to do before you're able to go out there and say, this is what I think we need to do in our organization. So, the fear of it, because there's the talk, just like, with recruiting, for example, job boards were going to eliminate recruiters. No, it didn't. The recruiter's job changed. We had to do things differently, better. It also freed up some time maybe to do something. I know I started in recruiting when we posted jobs in the newspaper, which I'm sure you've never heard of. There was a right time to post to the newspaper. That was Sunday. That was, dropped on people's driveways. And the reality was the applications came in, Wednesday, Thursday through the mail. And, so it was probably a good 2 to 3 week period before you even had candidates. And then there were job postings and we're like, oh my gosh, now we've got hundreds of resumes. How do we, I worked in an organization that I had started a new job in 2002 in a very old organization, company that was over 100 years old. The recruiting director had been there 28 years at the time. And job boards were out there. And I knew before joining the organization that I would see their ads in the newspaper all the time, especially for a second shift supervisor, which, made you think they could never hire one because there's an ad in the paper every week for that. So when I started, I went to her and I said, there's this new thing called Career Builder, monster.com. Why don't it's a couple $100. Let's put a second shift supervisor job out there and let's see what happens. And she was very resistant. Again, change, this is the way I do it. I've always done it this way. I have all my systems. And I'm like, let's just try it. One job. Let's put one job out there. So obviously, again, that she did it on a Sunday because she thought that was what had to be done. I came into the office and I was walking down the hallway by her office on Monday morning, and I see her in there, and she's literally got stacks of paper on her desk like this, and she's stapling and printing and stapling. And I'm like, what is going on? And she goes, I'm never posting a job online again. Look at all these resumes. And I'm like, you're not supposed to print them. Yeah. So, that to her threatened her job. She didn't like it. It was different. But of course, within a year or two, we're posting all of our jobs online. And now, you're using social media and doing a lot of other different things. So, that's an example of where it didn't fit with the way she'd always done it. She didn't want to do it. And then when she did it, she tried to do it in the way she'd always done it. And I think we're seeing some of that with a lot of the technology shifts that are happening in the workplace now. We're trying to use the technology in ways that we've always used the old systems or, navigated the work the old way. And we need to be open to possibilities. And again, I think curiosity is probably the biggest asset that anyone can have. You should be reading about what other companies are doing, how it's impacting, so some AI in terms of hiring is creating some bias or demonstrating that there's bias. Okay, so what do we need to be aware of? How do we make sure that our systems are compliant? What do we need to do? What do we need to not do because somebody did it and it didn't work? You have to really be curious, and that can be fun and exciting if you approach it from a curiosity standpoint instead of this is going to take my job away. I just, did some work with LinkedIn where I kind of dove into their new AI assisted search and projects feature on LinkedIn Recruiter. And it's so cool because I can just remember, again, I did executive search for 3.5 years and I have always done recruiting and, kind of dabbled in creating Boolean strings to be able to get my search results and, followed a lot of Boolean experts and got them to write strings for me or maybe even paid them sometimes. And now you can go into LinkedIn Recruiter with their new AI assisted search and projects and just say, I want to find an engineer on the West Coast of the US who works in consumer products. And it's going to not only populate your search results, but then it's going to suggest how you can refine that search and you can have a conversation with it basically. So it's almost like a partner. Now, some recruiters may be, I'm an expert at really sourcing candidates, et cetera. That's going to threaten my job. And my response to that is this gives you more time now to engage with the candidates that are really a good fit for your jobs. This gives you more time to work with your hiring managers on how to select and hire the right candidates that's a good fit for your culture. Gives you more time to engage with the candidates. Those are the value-added activities. All that pre-work that was done up front to kind of get to the pool of talent you wanted to talk to now can be done more efficiently, probably better with the assistance of technology. So to think of it as how can I do more of the work that I add value with, that I'm freed up from the things that were just tasks. That's, again, how I think we need to approach technology in the workplace.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I'm a writer by trade, so naturally the advent of ChatGPT was quite scary for people like myself. Luckily I've been working at it for a while, so I felt pretty comfortable in my position. But it was like, this moment at the beginning of this technology really coming to the forefront was, I think, frightening for a lot of people until we started to realize, exactly what you just said. this is actually now a tool that can help us scale our activities, that can help us decide more meaningfully what we really spend our time on. It's not so much it's not technology. And I think that even the designers of technology, such as AI chatbots, et cetera, are never thinking they want to replace people who are doing good work. They're thinking like, how do we actually make their lives easier and their work better, free their time up to make more kind of strategic moves rather than just doing the most sort of mundane version of the task at all times.
Right. And I think, we as the people of the workplace do have to consider the human element. Who knows, maybe 5-10 years from now, we'll all be interacting with our chatbot overlords and we won't interact with humans. But I think today we're not there yet. So, we need to not over-engineer, would probably be my thoughts. Let's not over-engineer all the, the work that we do in the people space where, how many of us get so frustrated when you call in through a voice system and I end up screaming representative. I actually heard on a podcast in the last couple of weeks that if you curse when instead of screaming representative, if you use profanity, it will take you to a human. I'm like, oh, good news. I needed to know that because the system is trained. Oh, this person's like really upset. I think we don't want to do that, where we're taking the human element out. I think the focus, especially post-pandemic in the workplace, is really on a more human-centered workplace. So our role is, I think, to think about how we can use technology, again, to free up time and tasks to focus on more value-added work, but yet not make the workplace inhuman so that you never get to talk to an HR person if you have a question, but maybe the frequently asked questions are easily accessible 24/7 via a chat bot or some sort of automated system. But if you want to talk to a human, you can, and we still have the skills and the ability to be able to support you. So that's, I think, the balancing act for every leader in the organization is how do we access technology to help us do work better, faster, more efficiently? What are the value-added tasks we really want to skill people up on and make sure that we're doing more of? And how do we make sure that we're able to do all that and maintain that connection that we desire as humans?
Yeah. And those sound to me like strategies for embracing change, curiosity and keeping the human centered. I mean, what advice would you have for a leader who wants to be a champion for change? How do they begin to embrace change, and like what strategies for implementing it in the workplace can they start to think about?
Well, again, I think that curiosity is probably the first step. I want to be someone who's not just staying in my lane and only reading, or, many people don't even do that, stay abreast of what's current in their own field. But I need to be looking at what's happening in the world. Even if I'm a small, one person HR shop in a small town, I'm impacted by what's going on in the world, and there are opportunities out there. So that curiosity, I think, is the first step. Leading change is a skill. It can be developed, and we don't all naturally have it. So I think many leaders will approach it as, okay, I'm a leader, I'm going to lead change. And they may do it badly because they don't think about how to do it in a correct way. Change management, which we talked about for years, was always really about a communication strategy. Who is this going to impact? Who are the stakeholders? What is the messaging? What's the vision of where we're going to be after the change is successfully implemented? Doing that pre-mortem, thinking in advance what might go wrong. That was kind of the change management strategy. And many people don't have those skills either. They just, again, think about, okay, next week we're going to do this differently. And I sent a memo out to everybody, or I had a team meeting and I didn't take any questions because the decision's already been made. No, there's a lot of pre-work that needs to be done, again, to think about who this is going to impact, how we need to communicate, how they can navigate through the change that's impacting them. Change leadership, on the other hand, again, is what do we need to think about in advance? What is the big vision for where we're going? Leadership in general really is about casting a vision and getting people to come along with you. I myself have been a part of a big change in an organization that I joined that was about to go bankrupt. Again, the 100-year-old company I think I referenced earlier was about to go bankrupt, but it was a very iconic brand. And so some local rich people in our community bought the company because they didn't want to see it go under. And they brought in a whole new executive team and said, fix it, turn it around. We don't want to own it long term, but we want the culture and the financials to be turned around so that it will be attractive to the right company to buy it. And so to come into an organization with employees that had been there 25, 35, 40 years who were very resistant to change because they'd been treated so poorly, to think about both the challenge and the opportunity to do that was a stretch for me. But it required, there were things that needed to be done immediately and, changes that had to be made that nobody liked, and we did just have to do them. But a lot of the work, especially that I needed to make in terms of a cultural change and getting people on board with, maybe more current benefit plans and things that, again, they just didn't want to change. I had to do a lot of communication up front, a lot of hearing what their issues were, a lot of addressing some of the things that were very simple to address that no one had ever really heard, had nothing to do with the changes that I wanted to make, but I needed to gain their trust. And I wanted to help. Obviously, I was trying to manipulate them, but, to make the changes that I needed to make, I had to lay a lot of groundwork for building trust, for getting people to understand. I wanted to hear what their concerns and what their wins were, that we were on the same team, which took a lot of heavy lifting to get them to see the new leadership coming in as being part of their team and wanting what was best for them. And even communicating to them that our goal is to sell the company, so that that's a good thing for you. That's usually a message that's very hard to deliver. So there was a lot of foundational work that had to be done over really kind of a 2.5-year period where we changed the company tremendously. And of course, not everybody, loved all the changes that we made, but truly we did make it a better workplace. It was a better work environment. They began to work more as a team. Our quality improved, our productivity improved, our financials improved, everything improved. And when people could see that the original vision was, I want to make your lives better so that we can all succeed together. And they actually began to see that that was happening. It helped people to get more on board. And that was a skill that I think our CEO brought. That was kind of a natural skill that he had. But I had to learn a lot of that. I had to say, okay, I could change this policy today and just, take all the beatings and the hits that's going to come from everybody that doesn't like the fact that we've made this change. Or I could spend the time to really hear what their concerns might be, to educate them on why we need to, have them contributing to benefits, which they've never done before, what the cost is to the company, show them the financials, so by sharing information and trusting them with that, it really helped us to be able to make a lot of the change. So leading change is very complex. Again, it's casting that vision, which not all leaders are great at. It's getting people to see what their role is in achieving that vision. It's communicating relentlessly all along the way. It's sharing the good and the bad. We did a lot of that during the pandemic. I always like to point out, I think it's fascinating. If you're familiar with the Gallup organization, they've been tracking employee engagement for over 20 years. And I, before 2020, would often show the chart of the Gallup engagement tracking to sort of make fun of it, because it's really not changed in that 20-year period. It's gone from in terms of engaged employees, 28%, 29%, 27%, 30%, 28%. It stayed in that range for about 20 years. And so I was like, we focus a lot on employee engagement, but we're clearly not moving the needle. Well, to my surprise, in April of 2020, when both of my businesses had gone to zero, so I'm being curious about what's new and what's next. What is going to happen in the next, we're all thinking 2 weeks is going to be over. And I would remember reading and seeing the headline from Gallup, record employee engagement levels reported. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're going through a global pandemic. Things are not good right now. How could people be more engaged than ever? So, of course, you dive into the article and they've done some research. And a lot of what their results were showing, I think engagement went up to 40%. Or, it did jump 36%, something, several percentage points. What they identified was more communication from leaders than ever. Leaders were on those Zoom calls daily going, okay, here's what we know today. Here's what we tried yesterday. It didn't work. Today we're trying this. they were also saying, hey, I see you working on your ironing board with your kids running around in the background and the dog underneath your feet. Is everything okay? How can I help you? So we did a lot of communication. We showed a lot of care and concern. So it was a shared experience. We're all going through this, just trying to survive and figure things out. So employee engagement went up as a result of that. So surprisingly, September, I think, of 2020, I remember seeing the headline from Gallup, record drop in employee engagement. Oh, well, let's figure this out. So you look into that. Well, we decided we don't need to do daily communications anymore. We're not asking people how they're doing anymore because we're all just kind of existing in this, when is this going to be over? Is it ever going to be over? There was the killing of George Floyd in the United States, and a lot of managers and leaders didn't know how to address the feelings and the real impacts to all the people in their workforce, but particularly people of color. And so maybe they avoided having conversations about it, or they told people we're not going to talk about that. So engagement went down because we stopped communicating as much. But, in some cases, we didn't necessarily need to have daily communications, but that leadership being visible front and center, sharing what we know, what we don't know, showing real care and concern for you as an individual. That's where, again, that curiosity is, okay, if in April of 2020, during a horrible situation, it went up, and in September of 2020, it went down, what can I take from that I need to do differently as a leader going forward? Well, maybe I'm not going to do daily Zoom calls or daily stand-up meetings, but I'm going to be reaching out to my people and asking them how they're doing, maybe at least once a week. I'm going to check in with them. I'm going to communicate when I don't know something, what's happening. I'm going to share with them what the plan is. That's a leadership lesson that you can learn about, again, change management and change leadership, of a really, I think, good example of how we impacted change in terms of increasing employee engagement, and then it went down because we were not doing a lot of the things that worked.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when people's initial reaction when something really scary happens is to think, oh, maybe I don't want to say anything about this. Maybe it's not my place or whatever to talk about it. But like at the same time, that's kind of exactly when you need to step up. And it's really interesting. I obviously wasn't aware of these engagement surveys, and it sounds like what you're saying is basically when the leaders engage, actually the employees engage too. Mm-hmm. Is that the case? Like it's actually employees are waiting for that sign that actually this is an environment of engagement, and when you're talking to me, I'm happy to talk back. I was just kind of waiting for that first signal.
Well, again, it's trust and leadership. Anytime you do an employee engagement survey in your organization, you ask the questions around trust and leadership. Trust and leadership is really about, do I trust the people in the leadership positions to do what's right for me? Because again, we're all a company of one in the end, what's right for me. So in order to believe that they're doing what's right for me, or that they have my best interests at heart, they have to be communicating with me. Even if something is impacting me negatively or things are going bad, then they need to say, I understand how this is impacting you, and I want to hear from you about how this is impacting you. Here's what we've done to try to minimize that. But unfortunately, this is going to happen, and what I want is to work with you to navigate, some sort of message of, I am considering your well-being and your future. I can think back to, I only had to, fortunately, one time in my career, lay people off. And it was not a decision that I went willingly into. Actually, the initial thought was we were going to lay off 40-something people, and I got it down to 11, which was still too many. But we had to say, this is why we're making this decision. This is why you're impacted in particular. I know this is a negative impact for you. Here's the plan. We're going to offer you support in getting a new job. We're going to extend your COBRA. We're going to do these things. We do care about you. I don't expect that you're going to like this, but I want to be a partner with you in helping you to succeed. Again, did everybody love me for that? No. But, we've got to show them that this wasn't just a off-the-cuff decision of we need to increase working capital, so we're going to cut 11 jobs, which was, again, the initial thought with 40. So sometimes leaders need to be educated too. Hey, we can do this differently, but we have to consider that not only is this going to impact 11 people and their livelihoods, but it's going to impact the morale of our workforce, because now they're seeing people like them who are being negatively impacted, and they're going to wonder what's next for them. So we have to tell them, okay, by doing this, this is how it's going to impact the future. Here's how we believe that your job is going to be, you'd say your job's going to be okay, but you have to communicate to them that this is, we're thinking about you always. It's trust and leadership, I think, is what it boils down to.
Yeah, that's a really enlightening perspective, actually. And you mentioned a company of one, and staff are thinking about this, leaders are thinking about this, and I'm wondering, for the leader who is beginning to embrace change, why is it a good thing for their career? How is it beneficial for them, the leader, to embrace and spearhead change within their organization?
Well, again, it's about job security. If you think about, again, as I said earlier, change leadership is a skill. Change management is a skill. It's going to be it is a highly in-demand skill now. We've been talking about the pace of change and that it's probably not going to change. The fact that change is going to be a constant forever. It has always been a constant, but it's just the pace of change is, I think, going to be rapid into the foreseeable future. I don't ever see a time in the future where things are going to settle down, if there's such a thing. The world is just too volatile. It's more volatile than it's ever been, politically, human-wise, culturally, globally. There's conflicts around the world. There's global recessions. There's countries that are doing well, countries that aren't. There's too much change going on for my liking, but that is the way it's going to be. So why would I not want to develop a skill, not only to navigate that for my own well-being, because personally, if I'm leading the change or if I'm involved in planning the change, I'm going to feel more comfortable because I'm going to have all the information, right? Or at least as much as possible. But I also, I feel like that's a real path to leadership. And for leaders today, it's a skill that needs to be developed. Those who do it well will be the ones who succeed. Those who don't do it well will see their careers, I think, negatively impacted. So I think the role of all of us in the future is to think about, again, that curiosity. What skills do I need in the future of work to do the job that I want to do? They're not the same skills that were needed 20 years ago, certainly. When I started in HR, most of my job was filing, filling out papers in triplicate, getting signatures, walking around getting signatures from people, standing in front of dot matrix printers and watching checks print off because we had to have somebody watch them to be secure. How much has changed in the role of HR since I started in, the late 80s, and what the skills that were needed then? You were basically a good administrator. I mean, the SHRM was called the American Society of Personnel Administrators when I started, because it was an administrative job. And we've spent the last, 30 plus years trying to convince people we're more strategic. And I think we are. The role of HR certainly is required to be more strategic, but the skills have changed on an ongoing basis. I need to be, if I want to grow in my career, if I want to be the successful leader in my career, I need to be thinking about, again, being curious, reading, staying abreast of what's going on in the world. What are the skills that the leaders of the future need? Well, again, lesson from what I shared with you about the example of global engagement with the Gallup results. The number one thing that has come out of that, and the DDI does an annual survey of leadership, and in their leadership survey last year, they asked global leaders, what's the number one trait that leaders need to develop? It was empathy. Many leaders don't even know what empathy is, certainly how to demonstrate it. But again, it's a skill, it's a muscle. You can develop empathy if you didn't have it before. Maybe some already have that natural kind of tendency to empathy. But again, how do I, in a situation like George Floyd's murder, how do I show empathy to employees of all colors, backgrounds in my organization who are processing this differently? I can't just have a blanket statement of we're all going to be okay with this. It's not impacting you directly, so keep going. Absolutely not. You can't do that. But I have to be able to have space for everybody with where they are. I have to understand where I just need to be quiet and listen. I have to understand where I might offer a resource for them. I shouldn't necessarily be the resource. I'm not the resource for their mental health. But how can I help them get, answers and solutions to what they're struggling with. So empathy is a skill that leaders need. That's been identified. It's certainly been proven as to what, the workplace, again, we said earlier, is different. The needs of the workers, the desires of the workers, the demands of the workers are different. So if I'm not an empathetic leader and I want to be a good leader, I better think about how I can develop that. Change is happening faster than it's ever been before. If I'm not good at leading change or doing change management, those are skills that I need to develop. I think communication in an environment where all of my employees may not be in the same workplace that I am. So how do I communicate as a leader and make people feel that they're part of a team and that they understand our culture when maybe the only time they came in the office is for orientation, or they come in once a year, or maybe they never come in at all. Maybe I've never met them in person, but how do I get them to trust me as a leader, that I care about them and their well-being? Again, these are all new skills. Well, I mean, they're not new skills or new, things that we need as leaders, but they've come to the forefront. Empathy, communication in a distributed environment, change management, change leadership. I mean, the ability to be digitally fluent. You can no longer say, like my mom retired in her 80s and she worked in a small office supply company. And I remember she was like 78 and her brother owned the business and he would, very much wanted her to be there. She was very good at what she did, but he wanted to implement a new software to do their accounts payable with their customers. She absolutely refused. She said, if you do that, I'll quit. Well, he didn't do it, cause he's like, I can't lose you. You're too valuable. But ultimately a couple of years later, they had to do it. And boy, she went kicking and screaming, but of course she never, it was never the best way to do things. So as a leader, I may not have an 82-year-old, super valuable employee that I have to convince to come along. But if I do, I've got to be sensitive to, this is hard for her. This is difficult. This is, in her mind, not the right way to do it. I have to do a lot of vision casting again. How's your job actually going to be better? How's it going to free you up to do more of this? It's actually going to help us to communicate with our customers better. They've been asking us for digital invoices and not paper, so there's so much that I need to do as a leader if I want that valuable employee to come along. And I think that is now more important than ever.
Yeah. That's really, I've never thought about it that way before. That being a change leader is actually a skill that a variety of leaders need to adopt and perfect these days. And it sounds like, one thing you're talking about a lot here is how messaging changes is an integral part of change management and change leadership. I guess one question that is kind of lingering with me is like, when you're embarking on your first change leadership initiative, I think that people will be asking themselves, like, what if I fail? What if I've taken on a big initiative and I fail at properly affecting this change? I bring on a vendor or a new process or something, and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. Like, what happens then?
Yeah, I think you could paper your office with inspirational quotes, like, from, I think Henry Ford said, failure is just the opportunity to begin again. Failure is learning and act, all these things that people say, which are true, in the sense. I think you will fail. I mean, we'll all fail. Something will not go the way we had planned, even if we've done the pre-mortems and we've really, tried to prepare for as much change, because we are dealing with people and people behave differently than either we expect or sometimes in different ways than what is optimal. So there will be failure. I think, again, the change leadership, change management skill is I need to understand what I need to be transparent about. What are the facts of the failure? What do I need to communicate to employees as to why we failed? I need to own the response. What does it mean to actually take responsibility? And that doesn't mean, I'm the leader, so I take responsibility, but you guys all did the wrong things. It's how do you accept responsibility for the failure and who needs to accept responsibility? But again, that transparency, that communication, that ability to take in the facts of what happened and to redirect. Okay, so either we need to take a step back and rethink this, or here's what we're going to do as a result of what we've learned. I'm sorry that this impacted you negatively. We're going to either compensate you or we're going to do something, to try to make you whole. So it's that ability to just stay in the game. But the The failures, I think, in change management initiatives, where there is failure, is when we are not honest with people that it was a failure. And we're not taking responsibility for it. And we're not showing them, as a result of this, here's what we're going to do different. Often it is, this failed, it's your fault. We're going to keep pushing with what we initially thought we were going to do because you're the problem, rather than really evaluating what the problem is, trying to address that, communicating to people what went wrong, why we're making the change and going in a different direction, or why we're staying the course and what we're doing differently that we hope is going to make it successful this time. So it's really about, we are all in this together. I'm ultimately accountable if I'm the leader, but I've got to really focus on bringing you along. And that means I have to tell you the truth about what's happening.
Yeah. And this is just another one of the sub skills within the skill of change leadership and change management, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, so many leaders, again, they're protecting themselves because, again, they don't like change either. So they're withholding information because either they don't think people can handle it. There's a small amount of information that you can't tell everybody. And that is the challenge of a leader. A lot of times you do have information that either you can't share it yet, or maybe it's not legal to share it. There are things, think back to that layoff situation that I mentioned at the company I worked at. I had employees coming into my office daily because they knew something was happening. And they're like, I'm hearing we're going to do layoffs. Jennifer, we're going to do layoffs. I could have said, absolutely not. Go back to work. You're fine. But instead, I had to say something like, we're having a lot of discussions about what we need to do. And we don't want to do layoffs, but we have to consider all the options. So I have to come up with an answer that satisfies them, at least partially. But I can't not be truthful, but maybe I can't share that we've already made the decision yesterday to lay off 11 people, but we have a communication plan that doesn't involve me telling this one person right now. So that is the ability to tell the truth, to be transparent. And again, when people trust you, remember I said I had to do a lot of foundational work there to gain people's trust. When people trust you and you say, I'm not going to be able to tell you this today, but I am going to talk about this next week on Thursday at the team meeting. So I ask you to trust me and to wait. If you've done that work to build trust and transparency, and they have seen you do that when it was difficult before, then they'll come along with you. If they see you withholding information and then surprising them with stuff that they know you already knew and maybe you lied about. I mean, we had other managers in the same company that lied. That's a problem. And that's going to affect their ability to lead change in the future because people will always remember when you lied to them.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it's clear that you've thought really deeply about this stuff. I'm wondering, are HR leaders especially well positioned to lead organizational changes? And I'm also wondering, how does this impact other departments? Because we've talked a lot about HR-led initiatives, but I'm wondering, what advice do you give to your immediate colleagues, but also leaders across different departments and stuff like that?
Absolutely. I implore HR leaders to be the change leaders in their organization because every change impacts people. And your area of responsibility and expertise is people. So even if it's a new, operations initiative that's going on, you need to be in that room. So you need to have the trust and relationship of your peers in the organization that you don't have to come in and say something, which I said, I did HR wrong a lot, so that I've learned. I did a lot of, hey, you're talking about people. I'm in HR. Why am I not in that meeting? What my boss finally helped me to see was they didn't want me in the meeting because I was telling them all the things they couldn't do. We can't do that. No, that would be illegal. That would be immoral and unethical. Instead, my role as the HR person was to be in the room saying, this concerns me. Here's my concern. However, let me spend some time thinking about how we can meet your objective, but make sure that we're addressing this in the right way. Or, unfortunately, that is illegal to do that, but let's think about how we can do this in a way that isn't illegal. So to be thinking about solutions instead of offering up all the reasons why things can't be done. But HR needs to be in the room of change initiatives of any department in the organization, because all of that is going to impact people. So it's going to have to be a communication plan again about how it's going to have to be well thought through about who it's going to impact and how we need to either think about retraining them or addressing them or making them whole or communicating if it is going to eliminate their job, and making sure that we're communicating broadly in the organization, because that's going to make other people, so if HR is not in the room in the organization, in any organizational change initiative, it's a failure of leadership of the company, and it's a failure of the HR leader to develop the relationships that they need in order to have people look around and go, wait, we can't have this meeting without our CHRO or our director of HR, because we need to understand how this is going to impact people, and we're going to need their help.
Yeah. Every change is a change for the people who work at the company. That's
Yep. I've always said HR people have the most influence and impact in any organization. And I like to tell them they're the most important employees in the organization. And I fully believe that. And that's why I chose to go into personnel back in the day, because I wanted to be in a position where I had influence and impact over everyone in the organization, because I was a millennial before millennials were cool. I'm like, I want to be really influential. But the truth is, because everything in the workplace affects people, and that is your area of expertise, you are in the position as a people leader to have real influence and impact over everyone in the organization. But there's also a huge responsibility that goes along with that. You have to know your people. You have to have their trust and respect. You have to be someone that communicates transparently with them. And you have to build relationships with your peers so that they want you in the room.
Makes a lot of sense. One thing that you've mentioned a couple times is staying abreast of changes in your discipline and in the marketplace in general. So I'm wondering, what big changes are you looking forward to for the rest of 2024 and into 2025? What's coming down the pipe?
Can I take a mulligan and say, at least in the U.S., I don't know, with our upcoming election, there's going to be, it's up in the air. But I think what we do know is that there will be a need to have increased communication. What the stock markets are going to do based off of which direction we go, what the global economy is going to do, and in terms of, which direction we go. I think, again, what to look forward to in the future of work is more change, and if I am preparing myself for that, for how I can stay abreast of what's happening, how I can best predict what direction we need to take, how I can communicate with people what our thinking is, then I'm going to prepare myself for that. I think in terms of employment, we've had, at least again in North America, not in certainly every global economy, but really long sustained period of low unemployment, people able to get jobs, not enough people with the skills that we need for the jobs that we have, though. So the future, I think, is really kind of doubling down and focusing on understanding what the skills are that are needed for the jobs of today and what there will be, we anticipate, in the future, and thinking about how we can upskill and reskill our existing workforce, rather than, the 10-year ago or 20-year ago way of dealing with that would be just like, we're going to get rid of all these people and bring in people with the skills we have. They aren't there. We're all going to have to upskill and reskill. And I'm going to have to be constantly upskilling and reskilling. So to think about skills and what's needed to do the jobs and how we can get people those skills, I think is going to be it's a focus now. And more leaders are realizing that it is about the skills, because I can't just go out and hire, a new skill that hasn't been developed or that we're not teaching in universities. But how can I upskill and reskill the workforce that I have to keep the people who are already a good fit with our culture, but also they're the best fit to learn the skills to do the jobs of the future? How can I help them to not resist that change, to gain new skills, to realize, like my mom, we're not going to be able to do paper invoices forever, Peggy. You're going to develop a new skill on the computer. So again, that's the future, I think, is thinking about the skills that are needed in the workplace. How can we get people the skills? The future, unfortunately, demographic wise, is not in our favor. We're not going to have enough people jobs of the future. We're going to need AI, for all that we're talking about it taking jobs away. need AI to take over some of those manual tasks because we aren't going to have enough people that are going to be able to do the things we need to do. So how are we going to focus on the people that we have to give them the skills that we need? How are we going to use technology to do things that people don't have to do? And how are we going to lead into the future in an ever-changing world?
Yeah. What's not going to change is the rate of change. It's going to keep changing.
You're correct.
So thank you so much for spending so much time with us answering these questions. Could you tell us where people can find or follow you, or what you'd like our audience to know about you?
Sure. The best place probably to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm Jennifer McClure. Hopefully if you put that in, I come up first, but I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. And my website is jennifermcclure.net, where you can learn about my speaking and training programs and read some of my blogs and thoughts about what I'm thinking about in terms of the future of work.
And it's a great website. I've been on it, spent some time there. I could vouch for it.
Well,
so thanks very much again for taking the time. It's been a really interesting conversation.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.